The flip side of Dominick Hyde, despite being science fiction in the series Play for Today that normally didn't have SF in it, was nevertheless a smash hit. It was the most watched episode of Play for Today for the entire year, received almost universal acclaim from critics, and cries from the public for more. Not only would they get more, but the success inspired the BBC to go a step further, making a spin-off of Play for Today that focused on works likewise set in the near future, which they called Play for Tomorrow. Notable because the final episode, Easter 2016, yeah, that distant future year, not only had the familiar faces of Bill Nye and Cole Meany in it, but was also the first credited appearance of none other than Kenneth Branagh.
Silence is the price we've paid for integration. Every time we have opened our mouths, we've been told to be quiet or this college will have to close. Well, we have integration, and I believe 5 years of silence is sufficient. When the army was returned to barracks, the people were duped. Well, now we have a black uniformed fascist militia that's worse than any army.
And to think, before the decade was out, he played none other than Henry V, who also was known for a bit of a firebrand speech. The creative team behind the original both returned, along with some of the original performers. Of particular note was the final appearance of Patrick Magee, who died 4 months before Another Flip for Dominick would air. The week before Another Flip was released, Play for Today rebroadcast the flip side of Dominick Hyde to allow viewers to get caught up on it. Since then, neither work saw much of the light of day, a VHS release in the 90s and a DVD set in the 21st century, and one rebroadcast on the BBC in that time. So the pair remain a bit of a cult work. But anyway, let's see how they do with this sequel to the popular original. The work opens right back at the sea where we left off, with that country western song by way of Swansea, Better Believe It, Babe. When we return, we see the family is watching the classic A Christmas Carol, with Mavis particularly enjoying the affair.
The window where I saw the wandering spirit. It's right, it's true, it all happened. I don't know what it is.
Who's that man?
The spirit of Christmas future, dear.
Yes, he does look like the promise of eternal judgment, doesn't he?
What?
It's Christmas Day.
Sorry to spoil your party, Dominic.
But as you can see, I have Commissioner Gordon hanging over this vat of acid.
Merry Christmas, Caleb.
Merry?
I don't recall signing the form allowing for merriment, merely subdued pleasantries. He tells Dominick that he needs to report straight away. Oh, his Uber has arrived. When he shows up at the home of Caleb, their overlord, he's questioned about one of his subordinates, Bonington, who was charged with observing crimes in 1982, although Fashion would certainly be the first victim that I'd find.
Fathers Bonington is 25 hours late on return. No signal. He is snapped loose on the flip side.
In the future, everyone talks like Huggy Bear. Well, if there's anyone qualified to go look for this clown, it'd be someone who's visited that time period already. So Dominick is going to go back to the past. But his wife is not happy with it, although not for the reason you might think. She's upset because they have a baby and she's already scheduled to go on the flip side the same day that he is. So he submits a request for someone to babysit for those days. Could always ask Caleb to do it. He'd probably like taking the kid along to go place bets at the Hunger Games.
You better believe it, babe. You better believe it, babe. 'Cause in this madman's...
Hello, I'm Father McIntyre. You stopped answering the door, so I thought I'd try this way. Eventually, he makes his way to a phone booth to make a call. Not a police box, because, of course, time traveler professional courtesy. He calls up Jane, only a man answers, although Dominick doesn't know. He forgot he doesn't have any money here and can't get through, so he decides to raise some by emulating a street musician, putting his hat out and playing music through his ring. Weird Al Yankovic is not amused. After a cop drives him off, Dominick heads back to the phone booth while Jane kisses her new man goodbye before he leaves for work as well. Alas, he's an Atlantean and has to rally his people to fight the shark god. Luckily, he's gone just when Dominick calls up, explaining he's at Union Station and ready to swing by, assuming she's interested in a reunion, of course. Despite calling, though, she's so shocked when he actually shows up that she faints. Although she could have been expecting her boyfriend living on Earth 14, having finished the crisis a little early. Once she comes round and they have a chance to get past the shock of things, he explains that he wouldn't have intruded on her life again if he didn't need help finding Bonington. But Jane notes that whatever his business is, he has no business presuming he can just walk back into her life and tell her to drop everything to help with his errand. After all, she's got design work to do.
Clothes for the future.
You think they'll catch on?
No.
It's tasteful. It's got no chance at 1982. He's a bit surprised to learn that a millionaire has to live like this, although then again, this is London. She's got to be close to a millionaire to be able to afford that. Actually, she explains that the plan to make her and their son incredibly wealthy hit a bit of a snag. Seems that several other people got lucky and the prize was split. Although I wonder if they're all thanks to time travelers trying to win at gambling for their illegitimate spawn across the continuum.
I can do it again.
No, don't. Please don't. I've got quite enough.
Yeah, plus it'll look suspicious if she manages to pull it off again. You don't want whoever handles 1980s London football pools. Is that a private thing? Is that like the way states in the U.S. run the lottery? Is it the London mob? Well, it doesn't matter. Probably not people you want to piss off. Thatcher would probably wind up getting involved any case. The subject gets around to her current man candy, Duncan, who was acting like a father to their child, so that's good. I don't want to think falling behind on my child support would impact the financial well-being of my great-grandfather. While they see to that, we cut back to the future, which is happening at the same time, of course.
I have to leave. Home help is here, Ava. In time.
Hi there. I understand you ordered a Bob Ross to help out around the house? While he settles in to watch the little tyke, let's cut back to the past.
They destroy your body.
And obviously, in your case, that's damaging business property. I like the fact there's a no smoking sign, and yet the cop has an ashtray right on his desk. These were the days when nobody gave a damn. He asks as it turns out that a Dominick Hyde was actually picked up and is being brought up on charges, so the real Dominick has to grab him and tell him to shut up and let Dominick handle things in court. This situation clearly calls for a man who knows what he's doing. We find out the idiot got drunk and took a swing at a cop, plus some kind of traffic violation. It's best to hope that didn't happen with his flying saucer, or it's going to be hard to explain. Dominick does the best that a man who has no idea what the fuck is going on can hope, and thankfully the person in charge, I'm not sure she's a judge. She's dressed like she's planning to attend an estate auction, and all the English judges that I've ever seen look like choir singers disguised as lambs ready to sit down for dinner. She's releasing Bonington into Dominick's custody, provided he leaves his name and address to ensure that they'll come back. What a ridiculous system. No wonder they fail to keep over 1% of their population behind bars like a civilized country. Well, time to think things through.
Caleb, think. Double think.
As you can see, we're getting more of a sense about the future in this one than in the original, since that was more about showing a contrast between the sanitized, safety-obsessed future with the dirty but full of life past. Now we're seeing things like cleanliness, mental powers, conveniences, fleshing out the world of the future, since the contrast is no longer the theme. Of course, the major issue does nevertheless remain, the question of whether or not it's worth the sacrifices to have the future that we're seeing. Now, briefly putting aside all jokes, there's no sign that this is any kind of real dystopia, but rather it seems like what we have is a world where all of the edges have been filed off. There are no longer the rebels, the counterculture, an alternative to the sedate world of watching the past, drinking wine, and having sense once you've made sure to shower thoroughly. The world seems stagnant. Perhaps all the more reason to seek entertainment by examining the past. After discovering the malfunctioning flying saucer has been removed, Jane says that it was apparently impounded, in between laughs at how ludicrous it is that their space-time machine got towed away for failing to feed the meter. While she phones up Felix for help, Bonington realizes the rumors about Dominick are true, and that Jane is the woman that he knocked up. Dominick warns that if this is in any way related to what Bonington did, Caleb is going to drop him in the python tank. Oh, meanwhile, the help has come by.
This is Pyrus, and this is Gilby.
Gilby?
Yes.
Hey, Pilar.
How you do? Senora, washing is not finished. Problem. Machine, stick. I apologize. My English is still bad.
Apologize all you want, but they're still voting leave. She's left to watch after Bonington while Jane and Dominick go to pick up the kid, and the theme song plays again because it's got to have been at least 5 minutes since we played it. During this, Jane and Dominick settle on the bench and begin making out to prove how wrong his wife was about this trip to the past being a chance to see his old girlfriend. Once they're finished with their outing, Dominick insists that she call Felix again while he feeds the kid. This is why everyone needs a Bob Ross on call. Speaking of which, back in the future, Ava returns early, a mechanical fault, so she's able to watch their kid now. This is particularly confusing because Dominick, as indicated by both episode titles, is the guy from the future who goes back in time and gets called Gilby while in the past, except when he is called Father Dominick, or corrects people that are calling Bonington Dominick because Bonington for some reason thought Dominick would be a better name, plus the fact that his child with Jane is named Dominick to fulfill history, and in the future with his wife, he named his son Dominick also. Yeah, both of his kids are Dominick. He's the George Foreman of time travel. Anyway, figuring out which Dominick is which from context can be a little tricky, which sucks for me since we all know I'm bad at names as it is. So I know one name, but it's shared by amongst like 4 people here. Back in the past, we get to watch Dominick watching the boyfriend's music video. Duncan's a musician, see, and we're trying to get some more music into the film, you know. Jean is wondering, though, now that she knows firsthand that time travel is real, about all the things that go with it, like warning her about a disaster in order to avert it. But the problem is that Dominick doesn't know anything, shocking as that revelation might be. He knows some things are going to happen, sure, but not how to avert them. I mean, if there's a nuclear exchange coming in 15 or so years, whenever he said, there's not much that she could really do about it. If it were possible for the average fashion designer to avert a nuclear launch, I'd say security probably isn't doing its job. And of course, if there are other disasters that could be averted, that information is all in sealed records that people like Dominick aren't allowed to open because they're idiots, so they're not allowed.
Hello, hello. Long distance. Duncan, Jane's musician. What's it like in Brazil?
The prosecution rests, Your Honor. Meh. Because she has to run interference, the souffle collapses. But what is Dominick upset is that she pretended that he was nobody, just a friend who was here with his wife. And that means that she lied to Duncan about who he is. You know, it's as if he can't grasp the idea that people might not want him to be having sex with Jane. First his wife, then her boyfriend. Why is the world so opposed to him dipping his wick in Jane? They're just so unreasonable. Jane gets so exasperated with his bullshit and his repeated instruction to ease down, she finally throws something at him, only for the poor housekeeper to take it to the face. After she gets past that, she says that she left Bonington in the street just like he said and that it would be okay. We finally found somebody even dumber than Dominick. They head out to the spot, this abandoned building, and sure enough, Bonington is inside, because he's fallen for the Dominick story. The newspaper had mentioned a captured foreign princess, and they're in here, and Bonington intends to save her, a plan that sounds excellent to him because he's drunk again. He insists that this is all an ordained act, just like in Dominick's case, that everything he does is what was meant to happen.
Is meant to be. Even this.
Yeah, I'm sure we can blame the strands of fate and the whim of space-time for kicking your boss into the dirt. Well, we quickly find out this reasoning is crap because all too soon this dumbass falls to his death. And Caleb is steamed. How dare this fool go get himself killed before he had the chance to drop him in the piranha tank? So he tells Dominick to go back and do the day all over again.
Headquarters, Bonington and Cochrane must be imprinted. Dominick?
Would you like a puff of the pipe we stole from Gandalf? Essentially, Dominick is going to somehow reset the event so he can do the whole day all over again with the benefit of hindsight, and somehow without tearing space-time or anything. Although that could be the 22nd century hash that's come up with the plan. And afterwards, stop by that factory that makes the hostess snowballs and bring me boxes, many boxes. I sense the munchies for that forbidden food is growing. So Dominick heads home and finds Ava being entertained.
Home help, he's a jumbler. He's teaching me to jiggle.
I assume breast implants will be involved? Dominick is rather confused by this, though, that they need to keep a Bob Ross around for the duration of this mission. But apparently those are the orders. But for now, he and Ava are going to enjoy some wine from the past. Apparently it can survive the return trip, presumably since wine lasts so long.
It's fortified and travels well, so the man says.
Yeah, but the man will say anything to keep us in line. Kenneth Branagh will be the first to agree with me there. He plays Duncan's music for Ava, calling it the music of 1982, which is kind of like saying having onion rings and french fries counts as 2 of your vegetable servings for the day. By some extremely loose definition, maybe it qualifies. After enough wine to make that music sound tolerable, they have some sex. And then Ava naturally asks if Dominick saw Jane while in the past. And so he decides to lie about that. Ooh, that's a dangerous move. Lying is something you have to be half clever to pull off. So he arrives before supper, stepping right back into where he was the night before, except with the intention of not screwing it up this time. So he lets her answer the phone, takes out the souffle at just the right moment, and doesn't make a big stink about wanting the world to know that he's plowing Jane. This goes much better, leading to more making out with Jane, a point where only an idiot could screw it up. Yep, it's screwed up. Dominick cannot resist telling Jane that he's done the entire night all over again, as if she'd somehow approve that he flew in and altered her own fate specifically. And again,
Go now!
it's always the poor immigrants that have to pay the price. So while Dominick has managed to spectacularly fuck up his evening for a second time, in the future, Ava goes to see Caleb. It seems that Bonington's death in the past has caused his child to come down with an incurable fever, because that's just logic. So Caleb makes clear that if anything happens to Dominick in this mission, he'll go personally to retrieve the idiot. Oh, speaking of which, Dominick has moved on to the next phase and found Bonington in the same place, naturally, who's still drunkenly insisting that it's his mission to save the princess. This time he's able to save Bonington and puts him in his own flying saucer so that we can get this doofus back to his own time before he finds some other way to screw up. It's really sad when an idiot has to intervene because you're too stupid to solve it yourself. So Dominick's going to have to find the other flying saucer, but in the meantime, it's time to do the nasty and the pasty. Except that she's not sure she can continue to do this, be his 1980s squeeze when he happens to be in the neighborhood, coming around for some Rubik's Cubes and Pac-Man. And back in the future, Bonington is spilling to Ava like an oil tanker playing slalom through icebergs. Oh boy, this is bad news for Dominick all around. The titular one, not the dozen or so other Dominicks running around. Back in the past, Felix has located the flying saucer. It's been sent to an expert to try to sort it out. And on the way over the radio, they hear the princess is okay. Not to worry. They managed to get past the drawbridge and defeat the giant turtle. The way it's described, it's almost certainly the Spanish housekeeper that's responsible for this rescue. perhaps so that she can get the notoriety so she won't need a job where people will throw things at her. Once they arrive, Jane goes to try to get some answers, while Dominick goes prowling around the place trying to find it. Fortunately, he does, in a barn, but it's clearly been opened and fiddled with. He pulls out some cards to try to get it working, but that's when... Master Bruce is not available at the moment, sir. He's been waiting for Dominick, since it was obvious that this was way beyond the comprehension of a man in 1982, like Love Island. He rightly notes that lacking context makes understanding impossible no matter how smart you are. Give Tesla an iPhone and all you've given him is one more reason not to bother going out with people. All the NATO bigwigs are coming to inspect this thing, so Alfred agrees to help Dominick get it fixed pronto so that he can leave before the awkward questions. Well, the awkward government questions. Lord knows we have enough awkward questions from Dominick about things. Unfortunately, he's got to fly off before a proper goodbye to Jane. He just disappears into the sky as the bigwigs show up to wonder how he managed to misplace a flying saucer. Back in the future, Dominick returns home to discover no one's there and the computer won't say where they went. So he tries Mavis.
Where are they, Mavis?
Oh, dear.
Don't fool. Ava and Home Help, are they with you?
Wives. You know that word, Dominic. Wives used to leave naughty husbands.
I don't know.
As well they should. Now, where's Ava so I can show her all the things I learned about sex from my 20th century mistress? When he hears Dominick, that is, Dominick Jr. from the second continuum, he demands to be put through to her. And when Ava confronts him over what happened, well, he tries to have an answer for everything, but there's one thing that he didn't anticipate. Duncan being off in Brazil. And, of course, being such a master liar, when confronted on that point, all he can respond with is, Bonington, like he was Jerry Seinfeld complaining about Newman. So, while she fumes, Dominick is left to stew and hope Mavis can sort this out.
Lively dancing.
I can imagine no situation where this would cheer me up. In fact, I think we found the one time where would you like to watch a mime might seem appealing. Anyway, let's see how Mavis is doing.
Ever? Think of her. Poor soul. Trying to live her time, and Dominick pops up.
Not the phrase I would use under these circumstances. She explains that Jane is long dead and so nothing to worry about.
But he revives her.
In dreams. He cannot live with her. His body could succumb to poisons within a week. You smack him for a dream. Then we're all at risk.
No, you can use it as a metaphor perhaps, but then don't transfer the metaphor over to the real thing like this is some bad episode of Star Trek. We can debate about whether or not, say, using a simulation would count. But Jane's a flesh and blood woman. At least the first time when he screwed her was causal necessity. What else could be said about that, huh? If I didn't sleep with her, then I wouldn't exist. Oh, it's all about you, isn't it? And if you still have a part of your heart pining away for someone else, it's not really a problem so long as you don't let it get in the way of your relationship with the person that you're currently with. But Dominick is rather a heel whose only excuse in the moment was that he was caught up in the vibrancy of the 20th century that revealed by contrast how stale all aspects of his life in the future was. What allowed the events of the first film to make this tale of infidelity palatable was that it wasn't just about the sex, but rather how that experience and relationship revitalized his life and marriage as a result. Much like how under the right circumstances I can applaud Darth Vader attacking the good guys, under the right circumstances I can accept the cheating bastard in the context of the larger artistic work, understanding the rationale even if I find it morally dubious. Dominick's tale was literally about finding himself, and he figuratively and spiritually did that as well. All of these events, including the sex, bent before that, serviced the larger theme of the work to show him as a man reborn. Now Dominick just wants a good fucking.
He lied.
To spare you. If it wasn't for the dismal Bonington, you would be as you always are with Dominick. Content and smiling, child.
Yes, I lied about cheating on you, but only to spare your feelings. I'm the hero in this situation. So even as she convinces Ava not to be jealous because her husband is cheating on her, Dominick flies back to 1982 to find Jane again. But while she smiles at him, her body language makes clear she's here for Duncan, not Dominick. He's the dream for her, to continue the metaphor. So poor, sad Dominick returns to the future to talk to Caleb about what happened. Seems Caleb expected Dominick might do all the things that he did. That's the reason he sent over a Bob Ross in his absence, knowing it would compel Dominick to return rather than being replaced. He hadn't anticipated that Ava might run off and leave him over this. Whoopsie! Just gonna have to work a little harder on that psychohistory. Well, luckily for him, Mavis has persuaded Ava to return home, along with the baby, and is watching recordings of Jane and Dominick Jr., the one from the first continuum. And after a few comments on it all by Ava, Dominick has them erased, using the phrase, clean wipe. This ties it back to the beginning when they were watching Christmas Carol. Dominick describes Scrooge hopping around in delight on Christmas morning as having clean wiped his past. So for Dominick, this is likewise a second chance that he needs to not squander. So, maybe stop fucking around on your wife. The biggest problem with the work is that, as far as I could notice, there are 3 songs in the entire work, one of which was from the previous one, and none are good enough for multiple plays at all. While the fashion was awful in 1982, it was a great year for entertainment. A slew of memorable pictures hit our silver screens, and great music was playing over the airwaves, including 2 classics that have never really gone out of style, Don't Stop Believing by Journey and Eye of the Tiger by Survivor. But even the most forgettable songs from 1982, did we really have a song called Pac-Man Fever in the Billboard Top 100? Man, we were high. But even they outshine these 2 new, thoroughly uninspiring works, which normally wouldn't be so bad if we didn't stop everything in order to listen to them, and then use them for montage scenes as well. And to be honest, I was never all that impressed with Better Believe It, Babe. Certainly not to hear it so often that I can rattle off 4 times off the top of my head when they played it. Start of it, end of it, heading to the past for the first time, and when they're hanging out with the park. And I've only seen this thing twice, so there might be more than that. The other songs were played at least twice, and I think Duncan's dreary song about time was played even more than that. I can't emphasize enough how repetition of completely forgettable music only makes its mediocrity all the more glaring and disruptive. The number one criticism by others, and I certainly see their point, is that the comedy is repetitive, same jokes about smoking and being mistaken for a priest. But the true disservice is how it recolors Dominick's journey by him insisting on trying to re-immerse himself in it, to see him try to recapture this instead of being content to be changed by it. There's the old adage that the past is a different country, and that's especially apt here. You've been to this foreign place, like in the song Call Me Al, that offers a challenge to preconceptions and allow you to grow and change. This undermines it to suggest it's more about him wanting to have both lives. Ultimately, a sequel may have fleshed out the world a little, but it really didn't need it. The only really positive thing that I'd say this gave us is more of Mavis, which is played with relish and is not overexposed, thankfully. She's a great character. But on the whole, this is one of the cases where leaving well enough alone might just have been for the best.
All hail your